everyone, welcome back to my video. Grab yourself a cup of tea because we're going to be talking about gouache today. I just made myself one. This girl cannot function without tea. So I'm going to be talking about what I learnt while using gouache when I was making these two paintings in this video. I'm going to be giving you some tips, tricks, and also if you watched my last video, which was the 100 heads drawing challenge, I issued a small competition where if you could guess all of the people I drawed in that video, you could possibly win an art print. And I'm very happy to say that there were some people who were bang on the money, so well done to them. So I'm going to be revealing who the characters were later on in this video. And if you haven't watched it, maybe go back and watch it now if you're interested. Otherwise, you're going to see the answers about halfway through in this video. So the gouache paint that I used in this video is Reeves gouache paint. Now, this is on the cheaper end of the scale. It cost me, I think, about 20 euros from the shop in Amsterdam. It has all your basic colors, and it looks good, but I'm going to be telling you more about the bad things and the good things later on in this video. This is my Dahlia and Rowney designer gouache, and this stuff is amazing. I love it. It has saved my butt on so many occasions. It's brilliant for if you've made a mistake, for covering mistakes, and it's also great for creating highlights. So if you do a lot of painting, consider getting a white gouache. Now, if you're doing a lot of paintings, I would recommend you do this before you start. This is what I do when I'm preparing. So I create a border with masking tape, or you can use washi tape. Now, most artists prefer to use washi tape. It's the tack, the stick on the tape is a lot less strong than on masking tape, so it's less likely to damage your paper. I use the masking tape because I was feeling a little bit lazy and I wanted to create a thicker border. You can use masking tape, just be really careful when you're pulling it up because watercolor paper or art paper is normally very delicate. And you don't want to rip something you just painted. That would be tragic. The last hurdle. Okay, so we're gonna start with this painting, which I actually loved. Now, some of you are probably asking yourselves, what is gouache? I've not heard of gouache. I hadn't heard about gouache until several months ago, just before Christmas, I think last year. And I particularly loved gouache landscapes. There's a lot of artists who've done gouache landscapes and I thought they looked so cool and I definitely wanted to try it. So I endeavored to get myself some gouache, which I did. So what it is gouache is a medium that is sort of, the best way to describe it is midway between watercolor and acrylic. As you can see here while I'm painting, it has a very flat color. It's a very flat, bold color, which is similar to acrylic. The paint is also generally thicker like acrylic, but that is where the similarities end, because unlike acrylic, gouache can be activated by water, like watercolor. So if you're wanting to make it looser or a lighter shade, you add water, and it's really easy to manipulate. However, there is an issue with this. When you dilute watercolor, it retains the color that it was. It remains quite clear. I found that when the thinner I got with gouache paints, when I was layering them, the colors kind of merged together because the water from the thinner layer activated the water below, the layer below, and it kind of made it a bit muddy colored. So you have to find the balance between a really, really thin layer of paint and a thicker application of paint. Because equally, if you add a really thick layer of paint, unlike acrylic, gouache will crack. And you don't want cracked paint on your painting. That's not gonna look very nice. So you have to try and find this balance between thick and thin. And don't panic. It's not very difficult. You just have to experiment a bit and find what works for you. So that is generally the easiest way for me to explain what gouache is. Now, I'm going to be giving you some tips on what I found while I was doing this painting. The first tip I'm going to give you is to mix enough paint at the start of your painting. So if you wanted to create a base layer on your painting and you wanted to create, like I've done here, I did a creamy yellowy color. Make sure you've mixed enough paint to cover the area that you're wanting to paint. Because gouache, I found, doesn't spread very far. Again, this could be something to do with the brand as opposed to the medium itself. But you need a lot of paint, because the really tricky thing about gouache is once you have made a color, it is almost impossible to recreate the same color if you run out of it. So make sure you make enough from the start and save yourself the trouble, because otherwise you're going to have lots of mismatched colors. You can see at the very beginning of this painting, I did have that issue. I made a slightly darker yellow than I wanted, so I had to go over it with a lighter yellow. My second tip would be start with your lightest color first. So you can see that I did that in this painting. If you're using white or a very light color, if you are using white, try and use the white from your paper. It looks cleaner when it comes from the back rather than if you've layered white on top of everything at the end. You can do that, and I do that, but it looks nicer when it's come from the back. So try and build your colors to darker colors first, rather than starting off with the really dark colors. Try and build your colors forward, because that will lead on to my later point, one of my later points, and you'll kind of understand it's very difficult to go back if you start with your dark colors. As you can see here, there was a little bit of a jump from red to purple. I'm very sorry about that, but I think at that point, if I remember correctly, I was very hungry and I didn't want to cook, so we ordered Chinese, and I do believe the food turned up at that point. And I might have forgot to press record when I came back. I'm very sorry. So that is my fault. But I'm still new to the whole recording while I'm painting thing. So hopefully you can forgive me. It was Chinese, guys. I was hungry. So my third tip, which links onto the second one that I mentioned earlier, is that one of the reasons that you should start with your lighter colors is because gouache dries a lot darker than when you mix it. So I was mixing very, very light colors. I'd apply them. 5 seconds later, however long it takes to dry, it's a different color. It's a darker shade. So always start off with a very, very, very light color. If you're mixing as I did at the start, a pale cream, don't be deceived. You really want to add the tiniest amount of color first, because that way if you make a mistake and you get the wrong color, it's so much easier to add a bit more color than it is to try and make it paler. I'm sure lots of you discovered that doing different mediums of art. When you go to a really dark place, really dark color, you can't go back. Well, you can, but it's very hard. It's much easier if you start off lightest first and bring it forward. So as you can see here, as I mentioned earlier, I'm adding some white highlights to the peaches. But if you look towards the bottom right-hand side, the white that I have on that peach in the very middle towards the back, that's from the paper. And you can't tell as much on the video as you can in real life, but it looks a lot more clean than adding the paint on top. I don't mind adding the paint on top, and it was fine, but it looks cooler if you can kind of do it from the back. And here's me. As I said before, if you use the tape, look at that, you get such a lovely crisp line. And it looks a lot more professional, but do be really careful, because I found I was using Arch's watercolor paper, hot pressed, and it's a very delicate water paper, so I had to be really, really careful, because it was making the paper a little bit bumpy, a little bit bubbly. So now we're going to be taking a look at the 100 Heads Drawing Challenge that I did last week. Thank you so much if you commented. It was great to hear all your suggestions, and I'm so pleased to say that some people got them right. So here we are. Number 25. Well done. It was Hermione Granger from Harry Potter. Number 26 was Viago from What We Do in the Shadows. Amazing film. Definitely watch it. Number 27 was Melisandre from Game of Thrones. And number 28, which was the most difficult, was Billy from Stranger Things. I know there were a couple of people who kind of came back and forth about that one, but well done, we've got it right. So Hermione Granger, Viago, Melisandre, and Billy, which all come from some of my absolute favourite films and TV shows. So if you haven't completely wiped Netflix of all of its choices during this lockdown, then maybe have a look at some of those if you still haven't. Now, I could not carry on this video without a nod to someone who was integral in this particular video. I asked a very, very lovely lady if I might be able to borrow some of her photos for the inspiration and reference for my paintings. It was a photographer called Daniela Siobhan. If you want to find her on Instagram, I'm going to be including her link in the description below. Do check her out. I happen to know her very well because she's my boyfriend's sister, but please, I swear, I promise to you, I'm not biased. She's genuinely really good. So if you're interested in photography, she does landscapes, she travels all across the world. She's worked with some incredibly cool people who are at the top of their game. So do have a look at her Instagram. I believe at the moment you can also buy prints of her work. It was set up to support freelance artists during the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you buy one of her prints, there will be a portion given to the artist and also to charity to support freelancers, which is obviously very close to my heart as a freelancer myself. So definitely go and have a look at her profile. Now I'm going to be giving you the other two tips. So my fourth tip is to use different brushes. I before tended to only use round tip brushes, but I found while doing this one, actually using flat tip brushes creates a much more sort of random effect. Gouache works best when you're trying to create a loose image, not a really, really controlled one. It's great for illustration and it's great for landscapes. And if you're doing it for landscapes, it's best to kind of go for a not super controlled image, but a slightly looser one. So I found using the flat tip of my brush really interesting because I could create these really sharp lines, but at the same time, if I wanted to, I could get this really interesting pattern when I kind of prodded it from the top. You can just see I'm doing it there on the floor. And yeah, it created a really interesting effect. So do play around with the brushes. Don't just stick to your old favorite if you have one. I don't normally use flat brushes, so I found that particularly useful. My fifth tip or technique thing that I noticed was to do with blending. If you like blending, gouache might not be the medium for you. It's not to say that you can't blend. Again, maybe it was something to do with the brand, but I found that when I was blending, if I had water in the paint, it just made the other colors around it muddy. It didn't blend very well. That was if I could get it to blend, because more often than not, I would return to the painting having mixed new paint and it was dry and it was already set and I didn't want to disturb it. So I found that it was easier to build layers than it necessarily was to blend. So if I was going to do it again, I would probably have a go, be a bit braver or be a bit quicker at kind of trying to blend. But maybe that's dependent on having a more expensive brand. So just be careful if you do like to blend, because I think it could be a little bit tricky. So next week, I'm going to be a little bit strapped for time because I have the busiest week coming up. I'm swamped with stuff to do. So it's going to be a much simpler video. And I think I'm going to be talking about sort of redefining my goals for the year because, guys, it's almost halfway through the year. I cannot believe it. What happened to March and April and May? They just disappeared. So it's going to kind of be redefining my goals and what I want to try, because I have done a lot of the ones that I set in January. And also talking about style and finding your style, because it's a very hotly debated subject in the art community. And so I'm going to be taking a stab at talking about how you find your artistic style, or indeed if you need to actively look for one, because maybe you don't. Thank you so much again for joining me on these videos. I hope you like them. And as I said before, if you're interested in photography, do check out Danielle Siobhan on Instagram. Her photos are absolutely stunning, and without them, I could not have created these paintings, of which I'm actually very proud for my first couple of attempts properly using gouache, because these are the only ones that I've ever made completely in gouache, and I'm very proud of them. I've only ever used gouache as a highlight before, so very, very thinly. So I was really proud of them. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you will join me on the next one. Please do subscribe. If you aren't already subscribed to my channel, please do, because it gives me so much information about who's watching, and it will help me define the best content for everyone in the future. Thank you so much, everyone. I really look forward to seeing you on the next video. I hope you liked these pictures, and I'll be seeing you next time. Bye, everyone.